I think it's important to acknowledge that this time that we're living in right now, we're in this moment where we're seeing the effects of multiple movements. Water is life, missing and murdered Indigenous women, Black Lives Matter, and we're having somewhat of an awakening. At the same time, we're also seeing the pushback to that awakening.
Just seeing it there is enough for me to feel even less welcome, just because it shows that the people, not necessarily all the people, obviously, but the people with the power and the influence to erect these statues don't see any problem with it, and they believe that it needs to be up, and that's enough for me to feel unwelcome or uncomfortable.
We came across like this part of the trail where it's like, if you go to the right, you can go to an Indian mound. And I was like, oh no, like but like we went over and they had a sign, and the signage was really outdated. But what stuck with me was that like at one point it said like the first peoples, and the first was like scratched out. And I was like, okay, yeah, like this is like totally Ohio. Like this is like, and it's sad to immediately go to that. But because I grew up here, like I grew up when the Cleveland baseball team had their mascot. So like that was what people know.
46% of the curriculums, K through 12, do not, in the United States, do not mention Native Americans at all. So almost half of the states don't have anything about Native Americans. 70% that do have in the curriculum don't mention anything after 1900. So then we're stuck in the past.
These signs or monuments, like you get one chance to educate somebody, and that's it. You may not have that person in your classroom, but if they go and read that sign, like that's what's going to stick with them.
It may be kind of weirdly optimistic, but I like to view that even though we are in the land of removal, we can consider the new ancestry for 7 generations to build new artifacts and maybe give better documentation for future generation what to do with them.
It's difficult entering into spaces at OSU, at Columbus City sponsored events, where there's this acknowledgement that exists. They do acknowledge the land.
Especially with things like land acknowledgements, but they can become very performative very quickly, and turn into just like a box to check. But on the complete like other end of the spectrum, one of my coworkers who just recently graduated, they got like a permit or whatever you have to get to do a mural. It's on campus. The mural just says this is native land, and they used their own design in their own hands to create it. And that was one of the first things that I saw when I was on campus, and stuff like that. It means like such a huge difference, not just to me, but I've heard from other Indigenous students here. It says the complete opposite thing as what the Columbus statue does.
And I think next steps are beyond the listening, but action from people who are in power to do something about it, to say it's not enough to acknowledge. It is what is more important is to increase spaces of belonging for Indigenous people, but also for the intersections of identities, so that those spaces of belonging can be learning spaces and healing spaces.
I don't think we need a tribute. We're not asking for that. What we want is the statue put back where it was. Or if we're going to have public hearings about it, where we can all communicate and people listen to each other with dialogue, that would be beautiful.
I think it should now, in this year, become an education piece. Do I want it to go into a different structure? That's very nice. I want it to go back in front of City Hall with new education so that people can be proud that we had this individual who stood up to everybody. The Queen and the King of England stood up to everybody for what he believed was right and did not want the Native Americans hurt. And I wish people would get the education, because if that happened and we put it back, we could set the whole world on fire.
it kind of signaled, I think, to all of us that, hey, you know what, we've made it. There was recognition of our historical connection from the motherland.
I'm proud to say that I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and I'm proud of my Italian heritage. And I'm proud to walk hand in hand with my neighbor or anybody else who's here in Columbus, Ohio. Monies were raised from the Italian community, all of the original families, Italian families that have moved to Central Ohio, and there was a plaque erected. They donated the monies. All this was funded by private donations, and on that pretense that this would be there to memorialize you and your journey and coming to Columbus, Ohio. My grandfather was very proud of his heritage and gave to that cause. And to see that taken down now without a hearing, no reason at all, it's offensive. It's very offensive. It just seems like we're boiling back down against the Italian community. We're facing today something that we faced almost 100 years ago, all over again, by our elected officials.
There was no dialogue. The buzzword in City Hall right now is transparency and inclusion. That did not happen in 2020 with the Italians of Columbus. That did not happen. No one asked us for our opinion. It was just done. I think the statue became a scapegoat to try to take the spotlight off of what was happening in downtown Columbus, and it was an attempt to placate a lot of people who had issues that were demonstrating. I understand why they were demonstrating. I don't understand why there was such violence. In making out Christopher Columbus to be the bad guy at today's conscience, our church at St. John's was vandalized twice during that week. Christopher Columbus was categorized as a murderer, as this, as that.
He wanted to travel and he wanted to spread religion. So his reason was exploring, but also to be religious, to let people know about God, because he felt he was given so many gifts. To villainize us and to look at Christopher the way they have, you have to understand our history. You have to understand what Christopher was about. And the religion is a key point with Christopher Columbus.
Like a lot of people really want to put it back. And it was like, and I'm wondering like, well, what does it mean to you that you want to put it back? What's so important about this statue that you feel it needs to go right back where it came from?
Who values that statue?
Right.
People who value slavery. People who value having power over others, not with. And that's the ones who are mad that it's gone.
Absolutely.
We don't care.
Yeah.
We not thinking about it.
Right.
I don't even remember seeing it up there no more. Now I'm like, damn, it was right there.
That's been a conversation in the city since I was in undergrad. You know what I mean? I went to Columbus State my first couple semesters, and it's always that question about Columbus being there. And especially my studies were African studies, post-colonial studies. So like you're always studying about like colonialism and stuff. And so you're looking at the guy right there, you're like.
Then as I thought about it, and everybody was like, well, what should we do with it? And so Adrian knows I'm always going to come up with something. And I said, put it where you put all our Black history that you're not teaching our children. Put it there, because there's plenty of room for it. And that's how I feel about it. Like the statue doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't represent anything positive to me. And so I don't care if it's wherever, right? I don't want to have to look at it though. It doesn't represent anything positive for me as a Black woman.
We need our hierarchy of needs met in this country. And Christopher Columbus or whoever who wants them does not represent us getting our needs met, past, present, or future.
The one word I don't like, resiliency.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't like it because it's used for the Black people. You're supposed to be resilient.
This is only a part of our reality. And it's the part of our reality that continues to be beat in our heads. But this isn't our whole story.
Right.
And so when we only get bits and pieces, I'm like, sister, like, well, I couldn't pick if we could put a statue, who we would put out here, right? Because there's so many pieces that we have yet to learn.
Because it starts literally where the ship starts. And that's not our story. That's our story of pain. to where we got here now. It doesn't talk about the kings, the queens. It doesn't talk about none of the religions, the power we had, the community. It doesn't talk about none of that.
Right.
It talks about, here goes this ship, here go this place. People was getting taken for sugar cane, and this is what it all evolved
That's how
to.
it is in Maryland for the Blacks Wax.
It drives me crazy.
There's so much, you know, that is not, that we don't have a clue about a lot of times. Of course, because the hunter has been telling the story for so long.
If we take some of those funds and not do things that are symbolic, and take the monies and try to create a curriculum that is universal in the city for African people and also people indigenous.
When I was at RIPAT, we were doing a racial training, racial discrimination. The officer, he was like throwing up these different pictures. And one of the pictures that came up was the Confederate flag. He was like, Sergeant Hood, what do you think about this? And I was like, slavery, murder, rape. And one of my airmen, earshot, didn't think that I heard him. He was like, it's about pride. I'm sorry, whose? Whose are you talking about? Because it wasn't ours. Because our community was being tormented. And that flag is a constant reminder of that torment. This statue is a constant reminder of that torment.
If you're going to be in love with this so-called history of yours, then you have to face the mirror and what your history really looked like. Because there's no glory in genocide. There's no glory in enslavement. There's no glory in resource theft. You know, there's no glory in that. So